Hello, Arielle. Welcome back to the show.
Aloha, it's good to be here again.
We were just discussing that both of us are feeling pretty good today, and we've got a really good topic.
I'm looking forward to it. It's one of my favorite topics to discuss.
Yes, juicy as hell. So, I feel like a place to start is right at the very root. I would love to hear your own definition of that word desire, which I think has been used in many ways, is often actually almost like made wrong in certain spiritual traditions. And I would just love to know, like, when you say the word desire, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so to me, desire in its purest essential form, I believe, is our soul guiding us towards our destiny. It's our soul guiding us towards remembering who we are and what we're capable of, like in our peak expression in this lifetime.
Mm. Yes. Oh, I love that. Nice, really nice, sort of like simple place to start. Simple but deep. And this actually probably links in some ways back to our first episode. We were talking then about how most people are walking around very disembodied, very out of touch with what's true for them. Would you say that's also the case when it comes to desire?
Simple answer is yes, there's layers to it. The first aspect of this, I would say, is that to be connected to what we authentically desire. In my work, I make the distinction between authentic desire versus compensatory desire.
Mm,
Compensatory mean compensating. To be connected to compensatory desires might be like more simple. Well, I'm not even going to say just simple. Like a compensatory desire might be like playing into societal norms of what you feel like you're supposed to want. They can also
mm,
be avoidant escapist desires, like I desire to eat 3 pints of ice cream for dinner tonight because I don't want to feel my feelings, things like
yes.
that. But when it comes to the deeper authentic desires, one, a lot of us have difficulty accessing them because there's also an immense amount of fear around connecting to our deeper soul desires because our deeper soul desires tend to require or invite us to become someone other than who we currently
Mm,
are. And if we aren't in relationships or a context in our life that supports continual evolution of identity, um, desire can actually be a really threatening thing because we associate it with what we might lose if we
mm,
allow ourselves to move towards it. And the other aspect for those of us who might be saying, well, no, I really, really do want to know my deeper desires. It's not about fear. It's just I don't know how to access them. Um, there's levels of consciousness versus subconsciousness around it. And often when we're struggling to connect to our authentic desires, it means that we're also not super embodied in our boundaries. Um, when
mm,
when we're walking around in the world and we don't have clear boundaries in our life around like, okay, I'm available to give attention, energy, and connection in this way, but I'm not just going to overgive from a people pleasing place. Because if we're doing that, we don't actually have the space to know our deeper soul desires
mm.
experience.
Yes, yes, that really chimes. I love the way you've really made that clear, because these are things that there's a place where we just won't even like the whole topic feels really scary. And I think just some clarity around like what's showing up, like why people have this like, oh, when it comes to desire, and some ways in. So I would say in general, listeners to this show are going to be sort of somewhere along the journey of self-discovery, where one way or another they are in that conversation with like what's really true for them. And I think there's a stage before that where it is really challenging, because you know their soul is wanting to take them on that path, but like you say, if there is that level of fear, even getting on that path can be quite painful. Often it will take something like that, almost like thrusts us in that direction before we'll listen. But again, because I would say our listeners generally are, you know, people who are already on this path, I think talking at that stage where it's like, okay, there's some desires I'll let in, and there's some that either I'm kind of aware of, but like, oh, I just don't think I can really give permission to. And then also, as you say, sometimes it is just this like, I don't actually know those like deeper desires, and it will be because there's just like, you know, their energy is being given everywhere else. So coming to the first type, let's say first, I know personally that some of those really important twists and turns that my soul wanted me to take, you know, ones were a real choice. It wasn't a kind of like, oh, that feels like a nice little breadcrumb that I'll follow, but a real like divergence on the path. They typically did come with a lot of fear. They really were like, oh God, I know this is what's next. And the fear that that represents, as you say, often it is a fear of loss. With some of those, really took some journeying with, and to even just recognize. And it was actually, in some ways, had become a bit of a helpful clue as to the fact it was a deep desire, because it was like, this clearly isn't just like, oh, that would be nice, because the level of fear that was there, it was always just like, I know it's a soul desire because I feel like my human doesn't want it at all. So I'd love to hear your experiences and teachings on what you've seen around that, kind of when we have that clarity, but also all this fear that's coming up around actually choosing it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, affirming what you were saying is one way to sense that it actually is a deeper soul desire is one that it's not just going to go away, and that likely it's something that you'll feel and then like push away, but it'll keep peeping its head up, and there's the part of you that does desire it, and then there's the part of you that's like, this thing, you know. But you know, the other aspect of this is and there's a specific reason that I use the word purity when I speak about the word desire, because there's so much, especially in religious contexts, but I also feel like religion has kind of allowed the field to be permeated with this idea of desire being sinful or a not trustworthy thing. That even if we're not super religious, on some level, we've learned to not fully trust desire. And, you know, this is the aspect of the journey as well for people who are on the path as you're describing, as, you know, likely we've moved towards desires in our past that when we actually get the thing or have the experience of moving towards the desire on the other side, we're like, oh shit, that was actually me. I apologize for the profanity, but it's like, oh, that was actually me moving towards an old pattern of wounding and trauma. Oh, wow. This desire was actually like like an old pattern of wounding or grasping for something that maybe actually set me back on the path, or I pulled a spiritual muscle, or like I had this experience. Like, I mean, intimacy and sexuality and romance are such powerful places where we're constantly playing with what's truly aligned for us to move towards versus what is me just hungering for something that like I'm reaching for the junk food versus the soul food, something like that. So that discernment process is so key. And I think a lot of the issues that people come up with is the fear of like, can I trust my intuition? Can I trust
Mm,
that the desire that I'm moving towards is really what my soul desires for me to move towards, versus is this something that's either going to cause me harm or is kind of hedonistic in a way that it's disconnected really from like the needs of the all. Like to me, the way
mm,
that I orient moving towards desire is that desire should never be at the expense of integrity to self or integrity to the all. There's a
yeah.
way that moving towards desire can always be in service to the all. And, you know, probably my most profound experience of moving towards and saying yes to what I desire was actually my choice to move to the big island of Hawaii. Just over 2 years ago, because I had been out visiting the island for about 4 or 5 years. And instantly there was such like an, oh my God, every fiber in my being loves this place. And I even tried to move here the first time that I came out here, and I was pushing, I was grasping for it, and it wasn't the time. Um, and I remember 2 years ago, my last visit out here, I could feel this, like, I could almost feel the island like calling me out to like live with her. And I also had this judgment and resistance because, to put it succinctly and crassly, I didn't want to be another white person just move into the big island because I thought it
Mm,
was cool. I really wanted to honor there's trauma and there's history and there's wounding here around colonization and gentrification. And I wanted to make sure that if I was moving to this island, that it was really because it was in the highest good and what ultimately the essence of the island desired, versus my
mm,
mind wanting to just prolong this experience of like magic and beauty. And I really got into this practice of like connecting to the purity of my desire, um, being willing to let it go if at any point it didn't feel aligned, and like getting so rooted in it that I so trusted the desire that I was willing to let anything fall away in order to become, in order to fulfill this desire. Like I was willing to face the loss because I trusted the purity of the desire itself, if that makes sense.
mm. Yes. Oh, I love you sharing that. Thank you so much. Really, really makes sense. And what came to mind was how I was about to say sometimes, it's probably often, if not most of the time, even when it is a pure desire, even if it's a soul desire, it doesn't mean there won't also be wounding around it. It doesn't mean there won't also be a kind of fantasy that's created from wounding that's kind of there too, which I think can make it even harder to discern. It's like that what you described there, you really sat with it. And it's like what I, as you were talking, I was almost imagining like the places that weren't pure were begin the opportunity to fall away. And so what you were left with was the true heart of the desire, not the perhaps this isn't about you personally, but you know, like the ego part, you know, oh, it would make me look so good to be there, or whatever it might be. And I think that's helpful to recognize that these things they're not binary necessarily, where it's just coming from compensation or it's just coming from soul. There is often an interplay.
Yeah, it's such an important distinction. And this to me is the uncomfortable truth that most truth is found in paradox. Most
Mm,
authentic truth is found in the in between. And this is part of why I love the tantric path. To me, I experience the tantric path of knowing that like the truth of the present moment is constantly evolving, and that our job is just to learn how to be in real-time relationship with it, as aligned with it in every moment. And that there's this conditioning and culture, and again, this could be religious conditioning of there's good and there's evil. And as long as you're on the side of good, you're good. But the thing is, we are both good and evil. We are both dark and light. And a rejection of any aspect of the self is going to create fragmentation, which is what creates what I would call distortion. I was telling you a bit about, I'm going to be running a masterclass in mid-March on the 3Ds of material reality, which are desire, distortions, and devotion. And I won't go into the full thing because I'll be teaching it in the masterclass, but what you're speaking about around the wounding that comes in when we're following desire, I would also call that distortions. That, okay, so I'm moving towards this thing that I desire. I know in the past, like perhaps let's bring it. I work a lot with intimacy and relationship and sexuality because to me it's such a powerful place to work with our spirituality, which to me is just really alignment with what is what is most true and aligned for me in any moment. And temptation around sexual desire and attraction and romance. I mean, who doesn't on some level long for that one or those ones? Who doesn't long once they have the one or ones to sustain the having of the ones? And the fear of the loss of that union, right? The fear of that loss can create distortion. The fear of never having it can create distortion. So let's say I'm a single person, there's someone that I'm attracted to, and I really desire to move towards and continue connecting with this person. But in the past, I also know that my desire and my longing and the fear of not having the thing has perhaps had me act impetuously or like suppress some intuitive cues of like there's kind of like an orange flag here, or I'm kind of bypassing something, or I'm kind of leaning outside of myself, but I really want this thing. And that distortion of bypassing our deeper knowing and really our deeper value can cause trauma, wounding in the pursuit of desire, because it's a violation of the self, which I know can be a very like chargy word, but the fact of the matter is most human beings, because of the world we live in, have learned to kind of perpetually violate ourselves on almost a daily basis because we've been learned that's what I need to do in order to secure love, safety, and belonging. So that's why I love desire as an awakening path, and desire as a path towards our higher destiny, because desire, like if we're really connecting to that soul desire, it's that ping that beams down all the way from our spirit's longing into our soul, into the deepest parts of us, that spark that we feel within us, that heat, that insatiable curiosity, that feeling that we long to discover. And we get to learn how to navigate that power, because this is where moving towards what we desire is also deeply connected to our personal power, deeply connected to our power and ability to create a deeply meaningful, aligned life that we feel purposeful and fulfilled in. So to move towards what we desire, without abandoning or playing out these old distortions that have caused wounding in the past, that dance of learning how to move towards that feeling of what we have yet to manifest while staying in deep integrity with who we are on a core level is, to me, one of the most beautiful alchemical paths we can walk. And that's the
Mm.
core of the work that I do with clients and with group containers, things like that.
Oh, beautiful. I love there's two words that really stood out in what you've said. The first being curiosity. And I think sometimes that can be, particularly when people are like have still got quite a lot of fear around a desire, like noticing like where the curiosity is just naturally taking them can be a really good clue. It's like I don't think there is any faking curiosity. We're either curious about something or we're not. It's fairly like obvious where our interest is going. And that can be such a good way of knowing. Like it may be that like we're not quite ready to like fully illuminate the desire, but the like following the curiosity is a good step in that direction.
Yeah.
The other word that really stood out was power. I love that you brought that in. And really, this is what we're talking about here is really like life. You know, if we talk about desire as that kind of illumination of soul path, of course, as we move along our soul path, there will be opportunities to see what we've got there in terms of places that need healing. And I love the way you've just named, like, the more conscious we can be of this, like, it's not necessarily going to be however pure the desire, and in some ways, even and especially if the desire is pure, it doesn't mean it's then going to be this like just breezy, just like gaily skipping down the path. It may well be the desire is taking us to something that is going to be, often use the term in the work we do, material for liberation. It is going to bring the most powerful material for our liberation imaginable. It's meant to be there. It's meant to be in the following of that desire. And the reason I love the word power there is like, this is both, it requires us being able to kind of hold ourselves, you know, hold our power through those experiences. But it's also, my work is shamanic in nature. So it's all about power. Ultimately, it's like reclaiming our power from these places that we've left it. It's been splintered off. And I think it's so helpful to recognize, you know, sometimes these words like desire can seem, as you say, either we make them really wrong from a religious sense, you know, it's lust, it's bad, or very lightweight. This is, you know, the stuff of life really that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I love that. And there's, first of all, I love knowing just a bit about the work that you do, because I don't. And just right before you said it's shamanic in nature, I saw your medicine drum and I was like, oh, cool. You know, there's, it's interesting, you know, like how it's said that certain spiritual traditions reject desire. And I believe that. And there's a core distinction to me between moving towards desire, which is also curiosity. We could neutralize desire, has heat to it. And that's part of, you know, it's like the path of sacred sexuality. I think part of why people are drawn to it is because there's more heat. And when there's more heat, there can actually be, in a way, expedited transformation, just
Yes.
really through an alchemical standpoint. Like the greater the heat there is, in a way, the more it can decalcify, which again is an interesting conversation, especially with our last podcast, because
Yes.
we can become addicted to that intensity and think, oh, well, I'm just going to make everything really hot and it's like blow my life up. But there's a difference between moving towards what we desire and being willing to let it go, or needing the attainment of it. Like one of the things I'll teach is just that, you know, a desire may emerge for you, not because you're actually meant to achieve what your mind thinks you desire, but because moving
Mm,
towards that desire winds up putting you in a place at a certain time that connects you with someone that you needed to connect to for the next like step in your evolution that actually had nothing to do with what your mind thought you were desiring. Like you
mhm.
might have gone to the store thinking that you needed to pick up this thing, but then they were out of the thing, but you ran into the person that you needed to meet to have the experience you need to have to like have your next career, right? So desire is interesting in that way. And the thing about desire, which feels uh, shamanic in nature, is um the path of desire requires us to die, like over and over again. It requires us to let go over and over again. What isn't often the sexiest thing to speak about when we talk about the path of desire is that it requires us to often face an immense amount of grief.
Mm,
And not necessarily grief that you're going to just feel one time and shed one time and then you're going to be done. To truly walk the path of desire requires us to truly open our heart to life, to be broken open by life, and to be willing to take down all of the defense mechanisms, all of the coping mechanisms. And this doesn't mean all at once. Like
mm,
so much of this path is about the pacing and the honoring of our opening and realizing that there has been wounding around opening in the past. And that if we need to abandon ourselves by rushing or forcing to make something that we desire happen, it's distortion. And
mm.
our test from the universe is, are you willing to stay with yourself here and let the thing go that you think you want, to choose yourself in this
Yes.
moment?
Mm. The two things really spoke to me in what you've just said. The what you were just saying there about that kind of pacing. Um, I think this both can be in the choosing to act on the desire, but also, as you say, in the as we're going, we've chosen to act on it, and then the kind of pacing of it. Um, I remember, in fact, it was the very, very strong, clear desire, but I had so much fear it didn't feel like a desire at all, to shamanism
Felt like
years
love
ago.
it.
It was more like an anti-desire. And I took 6 whole months to act on it, and it was a conscious, like, I'm not ready, like, it's a no for now. And then it would, like, I'd check in, or I'd get a very noisy knock at the door from spirit, and I'd be like, not yet, I'm afraid. But yeah, 6 months. And I needed that 6 months. I needed that 6 months to work through what was in the way before I could say yes to it. But sometimes you say it's actually like we say yes, but then it's like we don't then need to like force ourselves and push ourselves whilst our nervous system's freaking out. I often say to students, go slowly, go gently, keep going. Um, and that's one of those things. It's like I say that to myself sometimes, sometimes it just is like, as long as you keep going, it can be as slow as it needs to be.
Yeah, that really rings true. And we'll pull in some of the vibe from our last podcast of, I have and work with different priestess lineages. And, in the mystery schools, there were levels. We live in a very wild time right now where there's all of this information, all of these skills, and all of these techniques available to us, like with the click of a button. And
Mm,
it may seem cool that we have access to this knowledge and to these lineage secrets and these techniques, but there was, as you know, there's a reason that you didn't gain access to certain knowledge or techniques before you completed the previous level, so to speak, because the preparation of the vessel is so key. Ultimately, I
Mm,
feel like the common thread of so many of these mystery schools was preparing us as human beings to channel source, channel the power of spirit and source through our bodies in very intentional and multidimensional ways. And there's so much power and beauty in those skills when we're grounded in ourselves, grounded in our bodies, and able to hold and wield that type of energy without being fried by it. I mean, people think sometimes of when you have the kundalini awakening, but you weren't necessarily asking for it or technically ready for it, and the way it can be deeply destabilizing. So there's I really just want to invite, this, like, you honoring the call of shamanism, of it's a lot of power to hold. Do we trust ourselves? And this isn't me speaking specifically to you, but it's like, what does it mean to truly hold the responsibility of that power? What does it mean to hold the responsibility of our desire, and not from a place of shame or punishment? Really
mm,
inviting us to look at where we associate responsibility with, like, the self-flagellation of, like, no, like, that's not what we're talking about. We're actually learning how to hold ourselves with an immense amount of compassion and responsibility simultaneously, so that we can learn. Like, we're here to learn. Our soul is here to learn. Our soul is not here to make us feel bad about the quote unquote mistakes we learn on the path.
mm,
Like, the last piece I'll add is, a teacher of mine from one of my neo-tantric lineages. One of the most powerful statements I heard her make when, a woman in the class, she was talking about walking the path of the sacred whore,
mhm,
which to me I would also equate with, the priestess path of transmuting, distorted sexual energy into truth and love. And she was like, what is, like, the one piece of advice that you could give a woman walking the path of the sacred whore? And this can translate to men as well. And she said, to be able to tell a story free of shame.
mm,
What would our life look like if we could remove the lens of shaming ourselves for our mistakes without abdicating the role we played in creating it? How
mm.
do we hold both?
Yeah, gosh, I really felt that. Really beautiful. So there's two, we're coming up on time. This is flying by. There's a couple of things that I'd love to be able to explore briefly before we close. The other thing that really stood out to me when you were talking earlier, you're talking about that kind of releasing and letting go, and you said something like, what wants to live, and it was just the synchronicity was fascinating. Yesterday we had our monthly circle for our one of our programs, 6 month programs, Mythical, and it was all about life and death. It was all about, which is the exploration for the whole month, really exactly that, what needs to die, what needs to live, what are the sacrifices, what are the prices we need to pay. And like, if we are going to really be in devotion to whatever it is that we're here for, whatever it is that desire is calling us to, it is a continual process of allowing things to die so things can live. And the reason I think it's so helpful to be fully conscious of that is because, of course, we've got such a distorted relationship to death culturally. And my sense is that is going to show up hugely, but not consciously, anytime we're in this like, oh, can I follow that desire? Can I not? Grasping hold. And I think the more we can bring death into these conversations, the more opportunity we are going to have to really be able to know what's true. And again, know that like is a price that has to be paid. There is no way around this.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many levels to it. And I mean, there's the material world level, which can be helpful. And then there's the spiritual context. I mean, to actually be able to hold, I'll go the spiritual and then we'll go into like the material of like, we can get so identified with this body in this life. And I suppose one of the greatest paradoxes that we could genuinely hold on an embodied level, not just in theory, but to actually hold that I am both a human in a body who has this personality in this life, and I am also a soul and a spirit that will likely continue to exist after this life. And while my personality may have attachment and fear around letting go of this life, my soul and my spirit also knows this isn't the end. And how do I honor both while also allowing myself to have a human experience and to not rob myself or shame myself for my fear of death, like my longing for life. And the other piece that, I want to add is the relationship between pleasure and grief. Because the relationship between pleasure and desire are so deeply connected. And similarly to desire often being associated with sexuality, which we need to start uncross-wiring that. That's part of the problem. Intimacy is not always sex. Desire is not always about sex. Pleasure is not always about sex. It's such a larger holistic spectrum. Why do we move towards what we desire? Because we think it's going to make us feel good on some level. There's different layers of feeling good. There's kind of like the instant gratification or physical orientation of pleasure. And there's also like the pleasure of living a deeply meaningful, purposeful, like service-filled life, where when you look back, you can say like, wow, like I'm really proud of myself and who I was. Like that's a deeply pleasurable thing. The challenge is even for people who could, and this is where the stereotype of like the people who have it all, like endless resources, can have whatever they want, the snap of the finger, but they're not happy. They're not actually able to be nourished by the pleasures that they're surrounded by, and they don't know why. And to me, the missing piece here is there's something that we're resisting feeling that is clogging the channel of allowing ourselves to feel pleasure. And to me, that is grief. It's the grief of living a life where we felt like we needed to repress core aspects of our deepest longings or truths in order to be accepted by our family, be accepted by our partner, be successful in our career. And if you feel free in those areas, there's also just grief at the state of the world. There's immense beauty in the world, and there's also great suffering. And I actually feel like it's a healthy practice to allow ourselves to feel the grief for our planet when it's true, and not to get lost in it or consumed by it. But I actually feel like allowing grief to move through us, even if we don't know what it is a deeply healthy practice. And it's actually what allows us to feel pleasure, in my experience.
Mm. Oh my goodness. I absolutely love this. There was firstly, just the way you said something like it's like clogs up the channel, and there was something so tangible about the way you said that. You know how it felt to me in that moment. It's like it's the same channel, and that then called to mind actually two things. The book The Prophet, where he talks about joy and sorrow being the same cup, and then it also reminded me, I don't know if you know of it's a kind of like, you know, master shamanic teacher Martin Practel. He's got this incredible talk called Grief and Praise. And praise he's using, I think, in a very similar way to you're using pleasure, and really like the praise of spirit, bringing that celebration of spirit, but also all of its manifestations, but recognizing in the praising you're also grieving, and in the grieving you're also praising, because it's something you know, you don't want to lose. And it feels such a beautiful recognition that, like, this is just, the more we can just be in that dance, that interplay where it has to be both. And I think even just seeing, as you say, like, it's the same channel. If it's blocked for one, it's blocked for the other.
Yep. Yep.
Mm,
And you know, it just, even just coming back to the cliche term that in French, orgasm is le petit mort, which translates
mm,
to the little death.
mm,
That the peak of ecstasy is also like the death of what was, and that it's this constant cycle of movement. um yeah, it really, like, to me, it really invites us into a devotional way of living, where we're really discovering, like, what is sacred to us. And that if, likely all of us are mortal beings, likely all of us will leave this earth at some point, and if that is true, like, what is sacred to us, and how do we build lives around, like, honoring what is sacred?
mm. I think we've danced ourselves so beautifully to a completion. So I love that you're doing a masterclass very soon. My intention is to make sure that this is out before your masterclass. So would you like to share about that? And I will do my absolute best to get this out before then, so listeners can go join it.
Excellent. If you can, that's wonderful. So it's going to be March 17th and 18th. And the masterclass is called The 3Ds of Material Reality: Desire, Distortion, and Devotion. So basically, what we're going to be doing is walking through a process of discovering, like, what is something that your soul is deeply longing for in your life right now, but there's also fear and distrust and blockages or uncertainty around how to move towards this thing that you're longing for. And we're going to walk through a process of helping you to anchor into the deeper devotion that guides the desire, and identifying the underlying fears or blocks that may be getting in the way of you being able to really trust yourself. I'm
Mm.
also going to be creating space for live coaching on the first day, and then the second day is going to be all live coaching and Q&A. I'm really desiring this to be interactive, and I would say, if anyone is interested in my teachings or doing deeper dive work with me, this is an excellent place to start, because this is the core teachings that underlie everything. It's free for everyone who attends live. So if you feel the call, I'd love to be there with you.
Oh, beautiful. And where can listeners find out about that? We will make sure we also have your website on the show notes, but if you want to share it now, then people can hopefully find it even easier.
Perfect. Yeah, it's on my website. It's www.ariellebrown.com, and you'll be able to find it on the homepage to register.
Wonderful. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Really have enjoyed this. Really wonderful conversation.
Yeah, I'm deeply grateful for the places we can go. Thank you for the generosity of your time and your invitation to be here.
Thank you so much.